My phone vibrated in my pocket at the worst possible moment. Standing before God and our families, my fingers intertwined with Claire's as we renewed our wedding vows on our 7th anniversary. I should have ignored it. I wish I had. But when it vibrated a second time, then a third, I discreetly slipped my hand into my pocket to silence it. That's when I saw her name on the screen, and the preview of a message that wasn't meant for me. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've bought something special to wear just for you. He won't suspect a thing. 7 years of marriage, and he still thinks I'm his perfect wife. Time stopped. Blood rushed to my ears as I stared at those words from my wife's number. Words meant, for someone else. A glitch in technology had just exposed what 7 years of trust had concealed. Thomas? Father Thompson's voice snapped me back to reality. Are you ready to renew your commitment to Claire? I looked up at my wife, her expectant smile, her hand gently squeezing mine, completely unaware that her world was about to implode along with mine. Was she thinking about him right now? Planning their rendezvous even as she stood before me, promising forever? In that heartbeat, I made the decision that would define everything that followed. I would say nothing. Not yet. I'm ready, I replied, slipping the phone back into my pocket, my voice steadier than I felt possible. I recited my vows mechanically, watching myself from outside my body as I promised fidelity to a woman who had none for me. When we kissed, to seal our renewed commitment, I tasted betrayal on her lips. Through the reception, I moved like a ghost in my own life. I accepted congratulations, made toasts to our future, all while observing Claire with new eyes. How had I missed it? The way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking? The subtle tension in her smile when our friends called us the perfect couple? You two make marriage look easy, my brother said, clapping me on the shoulder. If only he knew how easy it had been for her to lie. As the last guest departed our backyard reception, Claire kicked off her heels in our foyer. That was perfect, she sighed, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Everyone seemed to have a wonderful time. I studied her face, searching for any sign of the deception I now knew lurked beneath the surface. Her makeup was still flawless, her smile apparently genuine, as she began taking the pins from her hair. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, whose body I knew as well as my own, suddenly seemed like a stranger wearing my wife's face. Had there always been this coldness behind her eyes? This calculation in her movements? Or was I simply seeing what I now knew to look for? You were checking your phone a lot, I said casually, loosening my tie. Was I? She shrugged, the movement elegant and dismissive. Just making sure everything ran smoothly with the caterers. Lie number 1 of what would be many tonight. I'd seen the caterer approach her earlier with a question. She'd barely glanced up from her phone to answer. The ceremony was beautiful, I said, pouring myself a whiskey from the bar cart. I needed something to steady my nerves, to help maintain this facade until I could gather more information. Father Thompson did a good job. He did, she agreed, moving to the staircase. Though he went on a bit long about honesty and fidelity, didn't he? The irony of her statement might have been comical if it weren't so devastating. Was she testing me, seeing if I'd caught on? Or was she so comfortable in her deception that she didn't even register the hypocrisy of her words? I'm going to take a shower, she announced, already heading for the stairs. I'm exhausted. Perfect. I needed only minutes. The moment I heard the shower running, I retrieved her phone from her purse. It was locked, of course, but after 7 years of marriage, I knew Claire's patterns with passwords. I tried our anniversary. No luck. Her birthday, nothing. Then I tried today's date, the date of our vow renewal. The phone unlocked. My hands trembled as I opened her messages, finding conversations with someone saved simply as M. I scrolled through months of betrayal. Last night was incredible. I can still feel your hands on me. He's so clueless. Planning this vow renewal actually makes it easier to see you. All these appointments to arrange everything. M. Are you really going through with this farce of a ceremony? Claire. It's necessary. Just a little longer, and then we can be together without complications. Without complications. The words felt like ice in my veins. I continued scrolling, each message driving the knife deeper. Plans for weekends when I was away on business trips. Intimate details shared that should have been private between a husband and wife. Complaints about me, how I snored, how I was too focused on work, how our love-making had become routine. Things she'd never said to my face, preferring to discuss them with her lover rather than the man she'd promised to cherish. The calculated deception was what hurt the most. The way they'd used my business trips as opportunities, the way they'd laughed at my obliviousness, the contempt with which they discussed our marriage. I read messages from just hours before our vow renewal ceremony where she'd told him how tedious the whole event would be, how she couldn't wait to be done with the performance. I opened a photo attachment and my world collapsed further. Michael, my best friend since college, the best man at our wedding. The betrayal cut twice as deep. Not just my wife, but the friend who had stood beside me when I first said my vows. The man who had given a toast at our wedding about loyalty and the sanctity of marriage. The friend who had consoled me during tough times, who knew my vulnerabilities, my fears, my hopes. I quickly took screenshots of key messages and emailed them to myself, then replaced the phone exactly as I'd found it. When Claire came downstairs in her silk robe, hair damp and skin flushed from the shower, I was waiting with 2 glasses of wine, my face a mask of ignorance. "You look beautiful," I said. She smiled, taking the glass I offered. "Thank you. I'm so happy we did this today." Another lie. "I've been thinking about our future," I said, taking a deliberate sip of wine. "About what the next 7 years might look like." "Me too," she said, curling up on the couch opposite me. The robe fell open slightly, revealing black lace lingerie I'd never seen before. Not meant for me. "I think we should be completely honest with each other," I continued. "A clean slate after renewing our vows." Something flickered across her face. So brief anyone else would have missed it, but I was watching for it now. "We've always been honest with each other," she said smoothly. "Have we?" I set down my glass. "I know about Michael." The color drained from her face. For several seconds she said nothing, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape. Then, remarkably, she composed herself. "What about Michael?" she asked, her voice a perfect performance of innocent bewilderment. "Don't," I said quietly. "I saw the messages, Claire. All of them. I know you're planning to meet him tonight." She set down her wine glass with deliberate care. "You went through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy." The audacity was breathtaking. "A violation of your privacy," I repeated. "That's what concerns you right now? Not the fact that you've been sleeping with my best friend? Not the fact that you just renewed your vows to me while planning to meet your lover tonight?" "It's not what you think," she started, but I cut her off. "What did you mean by, 'soon we can be together without complications'?" I demanded. "What complications were you planning to eliminate, Claire?" She stood up abruptly. "You're twisting things. Michael and I, it just happened. I was going to end it. That's why I wanted to renew our vows, to recommit to us. While texting him that I'm clueless? While buying lingerie for him on the day of our vow renewal?" My voice remained calm, which seemed to unsettle her more than if I'd shouted. "Thomas, please," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I chose you today." "Was it the money?" I asked, ignoring her tears. "Were you waiting until after the insurance policy renewed next month?" Her eyes widened involuntarily. 2 months ago, she'd suggested increasing my life insurance, citing concerns about market instability. "That's ridiculous," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Is it? What about the withdrawal from our savings account last week? $20,000, Claire. Where did it go?" She hadn't expected me to know about that. "I'd only discovered it yesterday when preparing some documents for our accountant," That was for— Don't lie anymore. I cut her off. I spoke to Michael an hour ago. I hadn't, but she didn't know that. What did he say? She asked carefully. Everything, I bluffed. About the cabin you rented for tonight, about the plans. For what happens after I'm gone, about the poison you bought that mimics heart failure. I was taking a shot in the dark, piecing together fragments from her texts, but her reaction told me I'd hit the mark. She swayed slightly, steadying herself against the couch. He's lying, she whispered. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Claire? Explain to me how my wife and my best friend weren't planning my death. She sank back onto the couch, her facade crumbling. It started as just an affair, she said quietly. I was unhappy, felt neglected. Michael was there. And? The money, the insurance, the poison? She looked away. That was Michael's idea. He said if something happened to you, we could be together without having to go through a messy divorce, without you losing half of everything in the settlement. How considerate of you both to be concerned about my finances while planning my death. I never would have gone through with it, she insisted, fresh tears spilling. It was just talk, fantasy. Then things got out of hand, and I didn't know how to stop it. You could have not renewed our vows today, I said coldly. You could have not bought lingerie to wear for him tonight. You could have not withdrawn $20,000 from our account. She flinched at each accusation. I was going to tell him tonight that it was over, that I chose you. That's why I wanted the vow renewal. More lies, I said, standing up. I want you out of this house tonight. Pack whatever you need for a few days. The rest we can arrange later through lawyers. Thomas, please. If you're not gone in an hour, I'm calling the police with what I know. I'm sure they'd be interested in the poison purchases on your credit card. Her face hardened. You're bluffing. You have no proof. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd emailed myself. Enough to start an investigation, enough to make Michael turn on you to save himself. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Where should I go? That's not my problem anymore. I watched her pack a suitcase, moving mechanically through the bedroom we'd shared for 7 years. When she finished, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, I did love you once, she said quietly. Not enough, I replied. After she left, I changed the locks, then called Michael. He answered on the second ring. Thomas? Is everything okay? Claire won't be meeting you tonight, I said without preamble. Or any other night. Silence stretched across the line. She told you, he finally said. No. Your text messages did. The ones you sent to her phone that accidentally synced to mine. Another long pause. Thomas, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I know about the cabin rental. I know about the insurance policy. I know about the poison. His sharp intake of breath confirmed everything. We weren't really going to— Save it, I cut him off. I've already spoken to Claire. She says it was all your idea. That's a lie. His voice rose in panic. It was her plan from the start. She said you were depressed, that you'd mentioned not wanting to live anymore, that we could make it look like a suicide. I told her she was crazy, but you still withdrew $20,000 from your accounts last week? Still purchased poison? Still rented the cabin where you planned to be while I conveniently died at home? His silence was answer enough. Here's what happens now, I continued. You're going to transfer your partnership shares to me, all of them, for $1. You're going to resign from the business, effective immediately. You will never contact me or Claire again. You can't be serious. That's 15 years of my life. A small price to pay for not going to prison for conspiracy to commit murder. I ended the call before he could respond, then immediately called my lawyer, waking him despite the late hour. 3 days later, as I sat in my home office reviewing documents the investigator had uncovered, offshore account numbers, correspondence with a realtor in the Cayman Islands, research on countries without extradition treaties, my phone buzzed with a text message from Claire. Michael killed himself last night. The words seemed to float on the screen, disconnected from reality. I called her immediately. "What happened?" I demanded when she answered. "He shot himself in his car," she said, her voice eerily flat. "Left a note saying he couldn't live with what he'd done. Sarah found him this morning. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I never thought he would—" "This is your fault," she cut in, her voice suddenly sharp with accusation. "You pushed him too far. You took everything from him. He was planning my death, Claire. With you? It was talk. Just talk. Neither of us would have gone through with it. The poison in our medicine cabinet suggests otherwise. This was another. Bluff, I hadn't found any poison, but her sharp intake of breath told me it existed. I was going to get rid of it," she whispered. "After the renewal, I'd already decided I couldn't go through with it." I hung up, her words echoing in my head. Was she right? Had I pushed too hard? The police investigation that followed revealed more than I could have imagined. The poison had indeed been delivered to our house, hidden in Claire's jewelry box. Michael had withdrawn not $20,000 but $50,000. Claire had researched countries without extradition treaties. This wasn't fantasy. This was methodical planning. Detective Rivera, the lead investigator, showed me financial records that painted an even darker picture than I'd imagined. "They've been moving money offshore for months," she explained, pointing to a series of transactions. "Setting up identities, securing property through shell companies." "How did they think they'd get away with it?" I asked, still struggling to comprehend the scope of their plan. "Most people who attempt this kind of crime think they're smarter than they are," Rivera said. "They watch too many movies, read too many crime novels. They convince themselves they've thought of everything. But they would have been the obvious suspects." She nodded. "Which is why they spent so much time creating alibis. Michael had arranged to be visibly at a conference in Chicago when you died. Claire planned to discover your body after returning from shopping with friends who would vouch for her whereabouts. The poison they chose breaks down quickly after death, making it difficult to detect unless someone is specifically looking for it. And no one would have been looking for it, I realized. They would have attributed it to my pre-existing heart condition." "Exactly. A relatively young man with a documented heart issue dies unexpectedly in his sleep. Tragic, but not suspicious. The coldness of it, the calculation, the exploitation of my medical history, left me numb." "You're lucky," Rivera said as she gathered the documents. "Most victims in your situation never know what hit them." 6 months later, at Michael's widow Sarah's request, I met her for coffee. We chose a quiet cafe far from our old neighborhoods, a neutral ground where neither of us was likely to encounter familiar faces. She arrived before me, already seated, in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug as if seeking warmth despite the mild day. Sarah looked different. Grief had etched new lines around her eyes, and her once meticulously maintained appearance had given way to something more austere. Her hair, previously highlighted and styled, was now its natural gray, and pulled back simply. She didn't stand when I approached, just nodded toward the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice rough. "I know this can't be easy for either of us," I acknowledged, signaling to the waitress for coffee. We sat in uncomfortable silence until my drink arrived. I'd never known Sarah well. She'd been Michael's wife, Claire's occasional shopping companion, but we'd never connected independently of our spouses. Now we were bound by their betrayal, unwilling members of the same tragic club. She handed me a sealed envelope. "I found this in Michael's things," she said quietly. "I think you should see it." Inside was a life insurance policy Michael had taken out on me 3 months earlier, for $2 million, with Claire as the beneficiary. "There's more," Sarah said. "Bank statements showing regular transfers from Claire to Michael over the past year. Almost $100,000 total." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "But Michael had money. His part of our business was successful," Sarah smiled bitterly. "Gambling debts. He'd been hiding them for years. Claire was funding him, but not out of generosity. She was buying his help." "Why show me this now?" I asked. Because she's suing me for his pension benefits, claiming they had a common-law relationship before you found out. I need you to testify that they were planning to kill you for the insurance money, not planning a life together." Everything I thought I knew collapsed again. "One more thing," Sarah added, pulling out her phone. "This came from Michael's cloud storage. It's a recording of them discussing you." She pressed play, and Claire's voice filled the space between us. "I don't want to wait anymore. Thomas is already suspicious of the account withdrawals. If we don't do it this weekend after the vow renewal, we might lose our chance." Michael's voice tense. "Are you sure about the dosage? It has to look like heart failure." "I've done my research. Trust me, by the time they do an autopsy, we'll be in the Caymans with new identities." Sarah stopped the recording. "There's more, but you get the idea." I left our meeting in a daze, the evidence of how thoroughly I'd been betrayed weighing heavily in my briefcase. When I got home, there was a text waiting on my phone. "Unknown number. I know what Sarah gave you. We should talk. I can explain everything. I miss you, Thomas. We can start over." I blocked the number without responding and called my lawyer. Then the police. 2 weeks later, Claire was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was irrefutable. Michael's death had been the final piece. His suicide note had been a confession, detailing their plan from the beginning. As I watched the news coverage of her arrest, I thought about that moment in the church when my phone vibrated against my thigh, a technological glitch that had saved my life. If my phone hadn't received that message meant for Michael, would I still be alive today? Or would I be nothing but a tragic story, a man who died mysteriously after renewing his vows, leaving a grieving widow who quickly disappeared with her new lover and millions in insurance money? I'll never know. But as I turned off the TV and looked around my new apartment, smaller than our house but mine alone, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. Not the false peace of before, but something real, something built on truth rather than illusion. 6 months later, I stood at the back of the courtroom as Claire's trial began. I hadn't planned to attend, but my therapist suggested closure might help me move forward. Claire looked different, thinner, paler, her designer clothes replaced by a modest gray suit, clearly chosen to appear sympathetic to the jury. During the trial, a shocking revelation emerged. According to Michael's journals found in a storage unit, he had targeted Claire specifically because of his obsession with her and his jealousy of me. He had fabricated evidence to convince her I was cheating first, manipulated her vulnerability, and gradually escalated their affair into a murder plot. When this evidence was presented, I watched Claire's face crumple in genuine shock. For the first time, I glimpsed emotion that didn't seem calculated. A year later, with Claire serving a 15-year sentence and my life in Seattle far from our shared memories, I met a woman named Elise. We connected at a fundraiser for a local literacy program where she volunteered. Unlike Claire's polished glamour, Elise had a quiet, understated presence, thoughtful brown eyes, an infectious laugh, and a tendency to tuck her curly hair behind her ear when she was thinking deeply about something. For 2 months we shared casual dinners and walks along the waterfront, carefully navigating the getting-to-know-you phase without venturing into the deeper waters of our pasts. I found myself drawn to her intellectual curiosity, her genuine interest in others, and the way she seemed comfortable in her own skin without needing constant validation. When she eventually asked about my past marriage, I hesitated. The abbreviated version I'd been telling acquaintances, it ended badly, seemed inadequate with her. Yet the full truth felt too heavy, too bizarre to share so early. Would she think I was damaged? Would she wonder what I'd done to drive my wife to such extremes? Or worse, would she see me as nothing but a victim, defined by my trauma, rather than who I was trying to become? I took a risk and told her the truth. My ex-wife and her lover planned to murder me for my life insurance, I said, watching her reaction. Carefully, she didn't run. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions and eventually helped me understand that trust isn't about certainty. It's about vulnerability and good judgment. 3 years after the vow renewal that had exposed everything, I received a letter from Claire. Thomas, I know I can never undo the harm I caused you. No apology can repair the trust I shattered or give you back the years of peace I stole. But I want you to know that I take full responsibility for my choices. While Michael's manipulation created the context, I made the decision to pursue revenge instead of truth. I chose deception over confrontation. I prioritized my hurt over your life. I don't expect or seek your forgiveness. I simply want you to know that I recognize the full extent of my wrongdoing and am working to ensure I never harm another person as I harmed you. I hope you have found peace and perhaps even happiness in your new life. You deserve both. Claire. I sat with the letter for a long time, surprised by the emotions it stirred. Not love or longing, those had died in that church 3 years ago, but a complex mix of sadness for what could have been and relief that she had found clarity about. Her actions. The letter forced me to confront questions I'd been avoiding. Had I truly been as oblivious as they thought? Had there been signs I'd missed, not just of the affair, but of Claire's fundamental unhappiness? I remembered moments of distance, times when she'd seemed to withdraw emotionally, occasions when I'd been too absorbed in work to really listen to what she was saying, or wasn't saying. None of this excused what she'd done. Nothing could justify planning someone's murder, but for the first time, I allowed myself to consider our marriage with clearer eyes. We'd maintained the appearance of perfection while neglecting the foundation beneath. Claire had chosen the worst possible response to that disconnect, but the disconnect itself had been real. That evening, I called Elise, now my fiancée. Our relationship had developed gradually, built on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than the glossy perfection Claire and I had cultivated. Claire wrote to me, I said when she answered. Oh? Her voice was careful, not jealous or alarmed, but attentive. It was one of the things I most valued about Elise, her ability to listen without immediately jumping to conclusions. From prison, I clarified, to take responsibility, to make amends. That must have been unexpected, she said. How are you feeling about it? I found myself smiling at her question. It was so typical of Elise to ask about my emotional response rather than demanding details or offering immediate judgments. She created space for me to process my own reactions rather than imposing her interpretation. Surprisingly okay, I told her. I think I was carrying more anger than I realized. Reading her acknowledgement of what she did, not excuses, just accountability, it helped somehow. That makes sense, she said. Validation is powerful, even when it comes from the person who hurt you, maybe especially then. I considered this. I'd been blaming myself in ways I hadn't fully admitted, wondering if I could have prevented it somehow, if I'd missed obvious signs. Her letter made it clear that while our marriage had problems, like any relationship, her choices were her own. Does that mean you forgive her? Elise asked. There was no pressure in the question, just genuine curiosity. No, I said after a moment. But I can acknowledge that she's not the same person who planned to kill me, and I'm not the same person who trusted blindly. That seems healthy, Elise said. For both of you. Later, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text notification. For a brief moment, old anxiety flared, a throwback to that fateful vibration in the church. But it was just Elise. Love you. See you tomorrow. I smiled and replied, Love, you too. Some messages, it turns out, are worth answering after all. The night before our wedding, Elise and I walked along the same waterfront where I'd first told her about Claire. The city lights reflected on the dark water, boats gently rocking at their moorings, the distant sound of music drifting from a restaurant patio. Nervous about tomorrow? She asked, her arm linked through mine. Not about marrying you, I said honestly. Just about history repeating itself. She stopped walking, turning to face me. Thomas, what happened with Claire wasn't about marriage. failing. It was about deception and betrayal. Those aren't inevitable in every relationship. I know that logically, I acknowledged. But emotionally, fear is normal, she said. But don't let it rob you of joy. We can't control whether we get hurt in life. We can only choose whether we're willing to risk it for something that matters. I looked at this woman who had helped me rebuild trust, not by demanding it or assuming it, but by earning it day by day, conversation by conversation, who had shown me that vulnerability isn't weakness, but courage, who had never once made me feel damaged by my past. I choose you, I said simply. Every day, I choose you. The worst betrayals happen when we least expect them. Mine happened during what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. But standing here now, I realize that seeing that message, that terrible, revelatory message not meant for me, was actually the moment my real life began.